As Christmas approaches, I think back to that crazy 2015 controversy over the Starbucks Red Cups, and how some of that still relates to current times, including all the recent hoopla over Kanye West. Satanic thoughts on these today on Satansplain.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Bill M. here with Satansplain. Back during, I think it was the week of Thanksgiving or just before, I managed to record 3 podcasts. 2 episodes of Satansplain and 1 episode of The Devil's Mischief. The Devil's Mischief episode was the annual Thanksgiving Leftovers special. That's when I play the clips that I had to trim away over the past year from previous episodes of The Devil's Mischief. And there was a lot of stuff that I liked, but, I had to trim out for one reason or another. You can go to radiofreesatan.com and hear that episode anyway. But yeah, the other 2 episodes I recorded were the previous 2 episodes of Satansplain. It was sort of a 2-part topic. There are the people who like to conflate Satanism with the Illuminati and Freemasonry, so I dove into that whole mess to try to straighten out the truth from the fiction, the facts from the conspiracy theories, and of course, exploring the whole phenomenon of why these sorts of beliefs seem so prevalent in Nigeria. So that's what episodes 25 and 26 were all about. And I'm glad I hurried and recorded those because right after I got really sick, my voice just wouldn't have been able to handle it. I'm still recovering as I record this, so right now if I sound a little stuffed up or scratchy or whatever, well, that's the reason why. I wanted to rant a little bit about Ye, the rapper Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West, and just some of my own observations on the noise he's been causing in the last week or 2. So I started gathering my notes on this, and along the way, it got me thinking about an essay I wrote back in 2015 regarding the Starbucks Red Cup controversy. Since it's December, I figured I would read you that essay, as I think it will segue nicely into the other topics. Before I begin any of that, though, I know that the last 2 episodes of Satansplain were devoid of any Satanacdotes. Those satanic anecdotes, which have become such a feature of this show. So this time, I would like to begin the show with a Satanacdote and also end the show with a second Satanacdote. Yes, you'll be getting 2 Satanacdotes in this same episode if you can handle it. Cue the Satanacdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanacdotes.
This Satanacdote comes from Church of Satan Reverend Jared, and he wrote this to me back in November. I was reminded of a Satanacdote that took place 1 year ago today. It was the day after Halloween 2021. I was at the San Diego Zoo with other Satanists. While in line to buy my ticket, I noticed an older gentleman looking at me. I didn't think anything of it and continued to wait my turn. When I glanced back his way, he was still looking at me, and he tried to look away quickly so that it wouldn't be obvious that he really was staring at me. This happened a few times until he finally walked over and asked if I was a Satanist. I said yes. He let me know that Satan was real, and he wanted my soul. I simply said, okay, nodded politely, and turned back towards the front of the line. I had forgotten I was wearing my shirt from Satan Me that reads, quote, "Yes, today, Satan, and every other day for that matter." Whoops. Oh well. I'll take someone honestly caring about my well-being over someone yelling at me any day. And that concludes the Satanacdote. Thank you for that Satanacdote, Reverend Jared. Let's now go back further in time from 2021 to 2015. So what was the 2015 Starbucks Red Cup controversy? You might remember this. Like a lot of franchises, Starbucks coffee shops changed their decor in the winter to fit the aesthetics of the holiday season. And for them, that includes their disposable coffee cups. You might see their cups in the past decorated around this time of the year in December with pictures of snowflakes or reindeer or Santa Claus or whatever. And in 2015, they went with a full red design, just a simple red color. Like the Starbucks logo was there, but none of the other decorations around it, just red. Now, the supposed controversy was that Christians were upset over this. Christians were apparently accusing Starbucks of essentially removing Christmas and the whole spirit of Christmas by removing any kind of designs from the cup, like, the reindeers and sleds and snowballs and whatever. It was such a big story. Everybody was talking about it. The Onion even did a satirical article showing a cup with the Church of Satan's sigil of Baphomet on it, saying something like, oh, Starbucks has now decided to go one step further and make a satanic Christmas cup, or her. Anyway, what follows is the little essay which I myself wrote in 2015 that was published on churchofsatan.com. And this is an essay titled Gingerbread Clickbait Latte regarding the Starbucks Holiday Cup Controversy. For the few people on the internet who still haven't heard the story about Starbucks and the alleged controversy over their 2015 holiday cup design, Snopes has a great summary which you can read here. And here in the article, I give a link to the Snopes.com article. But anyway, I just gave you the backstory of what the article would say. So continuing. Don't worry, this article isn't a rant about Starbucks coffee itself or their supposed business practices. If it's Starbucks bashing you want, I'm sure you can find some website that will cater to that. Now, I enjoy religion bashing as much as the next Satanist, and I suppose that satanically, there's something good to be said about the public's knee-jerk reaction being, look how stupid these Christians are. But I have to take a step back and wonder if these reactions are just soapbox rants against nobody. Do these cup-outraged Christians really exist, at least beyond a handful of YouTube clips and blog pages? As far as I can tell, this mess all started when one right-wing blog claimed that Starbucks was trying to further a war against Christmas this year by having their 2015 winter cup design be a simple two-toned red cup, foregoing the usual designs they had in previous years, such as ones incorporating snowflakes or reindeer. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if this complaint was mostly just a desperate act to create controversy where none existed, for the sole sake of generating web traffic. Regardless, it worked. There were maybe a few more similar sites who decided to join in on the silly claim, but that's not what drove the traffic. What really made it a hot story were all the other blogs and clickbait sites reporting it as a story of, hey, look at these idiots. Most news stories these days are sadly just what's known as clickbait headlines. By clickbait, I mean headlines that use sensationalism or false intrigue to lure you into clicking the link or even sharing it without reading beyond the headline. In a way, they're not all that different from advertisements. Some of the most successful clickbait just makes the reader feel superior or powerful. For example, science articles that misrepresent scientific research in such an oversimplified way that the reader reads it and goes, well, duh, I could have told you that. Or stories about criminals who get foiled by their own stupidity. That's another thing that makes people feel, superior or powerful. Other headlines propagate in the same way that many urban myths do, because the reader wants them to be true on some level. The most successful stories are those that confirm people's paranoia or target people's strong preconceived beliefs. Some will share a news story without wondering whether or not it's even true, so long as they like the story, or again, just the headline, especially if it underscores a belief of theirs. In this case, consider people who are predisposed to either believe Christians are all painfully dumb, or even more popularly, that this terrible world is filled with too many people these days who are too easily offended. Well, I can't say that I blame people for having either of those perceptions, but it's important to note how emotional investments can drive a story, and to instead learn how to question things before you share them. In these sorts of situations, Anton LaVey encouraged asking cui bono, who gains. When it comes to the 2015 Starbucks Holiday Cup controversy, I would say that everybody gained. Conservative Christian blogs got to create more traffic to their sites. Left-wing blogs and general clickbait news sites were able to create reactionary headlines, which gave themselves a lot of internet traffic. People who like to humorously poke fun at religion got to do so. Late-night hosts and cartoonists had a new topic for hot material. People who ironically love to complain about the complainers had new fodder for their rant, the rant that we've all heard too many times. Geez, you can't do anything without offending somebody these days. And even the Christians who weren't offended by the cups in the first place either found a new reason to react against the jeers and join in against the supposed war on Christmas, or stood up on a different soapbox to tell the world how they're one of the good Christians who wasn't offended in the first place and now have an excuse to tell all of us what Christmas is really supposed to be about. Last but not least, this Satanist gained an article from the whole mess. So in the end, I guess it's really all about the season of giving. And that concludes my 2015 essay, Gingerbread Clickbait Latte, regarding the Starbucks Holiday Cup controversy. Now, fast forward to 2022. I would argue that things have only gotten worse as far as the clickbait phenomenon goes. I'm hardly the only one saying this, but we live in a strange world these days, especially when it comes to information. We have the greatest technology we've ever had. We have access to more information than ever before, but people doing things more impulsively, which as a Satanist I have to say is more like compulsion than indulgence. News gets more and more dumbed down with more clickbait headlines, which is the only thing people are reading and reacting to. Nobody wants to take the time to read an article. The clickbait is what's sometimes called rage bait, some headline to make you angry or confirm contempt you have for some person or idea. It's all reactionary. Also, massive collectivism going on, and that feeds into that. You hate a certain politician or celebrity, you click on clickbait that confirms that bias, which creates a bigger demand for it, so more of that clickbait is made, then more of it is consumed, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. And if you do point out that the media got a story wrong, nobody cares, because, well, the media's already on to the next hot story by then. Now, granted, I'm willing to entertain the idea that some of this may just be my own bitterness as a guy who's getting older and has, always been a bit misanthropic in general. I do realize that people in their 40s and 50s and older traditionally bitch about how much better things used to be in the good old days, and that the youth of today are crazy and immoral today, and the music and the movies are terrible, yada, yada, yada. Every generation says that. I realize that. But I do think there's something to be said about social media and those other things I listed. I talked a little bit about this in a previous episode of Satansplain, the one about social media. I am going to take a break shortly, but with all of that in mind, when I come back, I want to look at Kanye West, or Ye rather, as he's now called, and see what all the fuss is about. But before I take a break, let me just say, I know there will be Satanists out there who take the approach of, well, I don't care about this entertainer, Ye, or whatever he calls himself this week. So whatever stupid stuff he may be doing, well, it's irrelevant to me. And to that I say, fine, that is a perfectly reasonable position to have. More power to you. But the reason I would like to take a further look at the noise surrounding him is that I think it says something about humans and collectivist thinking and the like, and I have some of my own satanic takes I would like to insert along the way. Stay tuned.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
But these lunatics always go, well, because it says in the Bible. Okay, stop, hang on. I'm glad you like a book. I really am. At this point, I'm glad anybody's reading anything. And I'm not even putting in the Bible. The Bible is terrific. Give it a read. It's got monsters and adventures and hey, if you like torture porn, check out the Old Testament. Oh, man. Any Saw fans out there? Woo! Get the Old Testament.
That carnal comedy clip you just heard is from Radio Free Satan's comedy and novelty show, The Devil's Mischief. Learn more about the show at devilsmischief.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the official website of the show, satansplain.com. That is where you can hear all of the Satansplain episodes. You can also listen on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Stitcher, and other places as well. However you choose to listen to the show, please give the show a like and subscribe if, the listening platform allows for that sort of thing. Also, if you're on Twitter or Facebook, look up Satansplain. Give me a follow. As always, you can email me, bill@satansplain.com. That is the email address. One quick announcement here. As many of you probably already know, I was a guest on the nationally syndicated radio show Coast to Coast AM. Some of that 2 or 3 hour recording is available online for free, but I think the full episode is only for their subscribers. Regardless, I wrote an essay about my experiences, and the Church of Satan also got an email from another California show, that show being California Haunts Radio. They said they enjoyed my interview on Coast to Coast AM and wanted me to be a guest on their show, so I said yes. There's going to be a live stream of that on Wednesday, December 7th at 6:30 Pacific time. Hopefully that will be fun. I'm sure I'll post the links to Satansplain's Twitter and Facebook feeds as we get closer to the date. So, Kanye West, or Ye for short, as he calls himself. I'm sure it's probably old news by the time you hear this, because, news just keeps cycling so fast. Anyway, at the time of this recording, he's been the target of journalists, rightly or wrongly. Actually, he's been the target of journalists for years now. One of these celebrities that's, been in style to hate. I could fill an entire episode on all the examples, but let's just look at stuff from the more recent months. So let's start back in October 2022. Back in October, Ye and black conservative commentator Candace Owens were wearing shirts that said White Lives Matter. They wore them to a fashion event that was put on by Ye. Now, was this a publicity stunt? Well, probably. Candace Owens did just release a documentary on Black Lives Matter, arguing that it's a corrupt organization and they don't actually help many black lives, aside from the top people in the organization living in mansions, living in white neighborhoods. That it has propagandized this notion of helplessness against black people, programming them to think that they're victims instead of individual humans who can achieve something in their lives without blaming white people. Needless to say, I think Candace Owens has a point, to put it mildly. And I will go so far as to say that there was something satanic in this stunt of two black people nonetheless, wearing White Lives Matter shirts. Because, quite simply, they are challenging dogma. They are challenging the sacred cows of today. Why is it that a white person can wear a Black Lives Matter shirt, but a black person can't wear a White Lives Matter shirt? Why is saying White Lives Matter, or even All Lives Matter, considered hate speech? Why am I automatically branded as a racist and a white supremacist for merely questioning this dogma? How is it that any different than when a holy roller brands me as a sinner and a heathen for questioning his dogma? Now, I'm sure some people will say, well, Bill, you don't understand. The reason why there's a Black Lives Matter and not a White Lives Matter is because, yes, all humans are important, but black people have it worst. You don't understand the struggle of the black man because you're white and wah. Again, that's collectivist thinking, which I reject, which is also why I don't conform to the opposite extreme of white supremacy ideology, or thinking that my white skin identifies me or defines me, or that I owe servitude to my European DNA. But getting back to this stunt with the t-shirts, I'm not going to go so far as to call Candace Owens or Kanye West Satanists. I said the act was satanic, and I explained why. I've most certainly found things from both Candace Owens and Kanye West that, is fundamentally not lining up with Satanism at all. So I can't call them Satanists. But again, I do have to tip my hat to this blatant and hilarious nonconformity of wearing White Lives Matter shirts. Not to mention Owens probably knowing it would get her some press for her documentary that was coming up at the time. So anyway, fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. It's all over the news that Kanye West and Nick Fuentes were at a dinner with former U.S. President Donald Trump. And the press, predictably as ever, paint this as, oh, the orange man is a big bad racist. Nick Fuentes is an avowed white supremacist, and of course we would expect this to happen. Now, is Nick Fuentes a white supremacist? Well, he certainly has views that I think most anybody would consider racist, myself included. He also has thousands and thousands of fans who troll the comments section of anybody mentioning him in any way, shape, or form. Which means I may very well get bombarded. We'll see. But the details of this event, as I understand them, was that West and Trump have known each other for a while. Trump was having a dinner with a bunch of guests down at Mar-a-Lago, and he invited West. He told West he could bring a guest. Kanye brought Nick Fuentes. Trump honestly had no idea who he was. Kanye even confirmed this in an interview with Tim Pool, that, they didn't vet the guests. And Kanye confirmed Trump did not know who he was, and it turned out Trump was not happy about Nick Fuentes being there. He had wrote a statement about that. So you have one side of the internet screaming, they're all racists, and then people saying, yes, Nick Fuentes is a racist, but Trump isn't. And then back on the other side, people saying, see, Kanye is a racist who hangs out with racists. And I'm just looking at all of this and I'm thinking, back up here a second. The question I have is, why is a black man inviting a supposedly avowed white supremacist as a +1 to a dinner? Why wasn't that the question people were asking? I mean, wouldn't that make Fuentes a pretty lousy white supremacist? Maybe he's not a racist, or maybe he does indeed have racist views and Kanye does too, but they're not in conflict. Do you know what these are? Well, no, he's just a racist and that's that. I don't want to have to listen to him because he's a racist and that means he's automatically wrong. And if you say anything else, Bill, you're a racist. Okay, whatever. Anyway, my rant here isn't defending Fuentes or West or whatever. I'm just pointing out this stupid collectivism and one-way thinking that people react with impulsively. I'm sure there will be some idiot out there from a pseudo-satanic organization with an axe to grind against me or the Church of Satan who will hear about this show or just see the words in the description and say, oh, Church of Satan Satanists are racist because they have to ask whether Trump or Nick Fuentes or Kanye West are racist. Well, if you're going to throw critical thinking out the window and cling to collectivism, then I don't know what to say. Fuck off. There's no point in explaining to people who refuse to listen. Of course, the news is constantly on to the next thing, and the next thing, with Kanye at least, was the Tim Pool interview, I think. Now, Tim Pool, if you don't know him, is an independent journalist and a commentator. He had worked with Vice way back in the day, before Vice became completely terrible. He was covering a lot of the Occupy Wall Street movement when that was going on, and he has his own show on YouTube these days. Personally, I like him. I'm a fan of his work. I certainly don't agree with everything he says. There are some things I furiously disagree with him on, but overall, I like his work. His haters call him right-wing, which I would say he's not. But he does have his show where he'll invite one or more guests on for a discussion panel, and it's open discussion. Personally, I prefer that kind of format over the screaming interviews that you see on stations like CNN or on Fox, where, they'll bring somebody on, talk for just 2 minutes, and then it's over. You have 2 minutes to say what you have to say. Usually it runs, these shows, on the other hand, like Tim Pool's show, usually run 2 or more hours. But even when I don't listen to the full episodes, I can hear, some good highlights. So in this particular episode, Tim Pool has Nick Fuentes and Kanye West and, additionally, Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, if you know Milo, then love him or hate him, he's a provocateur. But Tim Pool invites them on, hoping to get some answers about, okay, what really happened at Mar-a-Lago? How did that come about? West said some anti-Semitic things online. What the hell was that all about? Can he explain himself? So, a lot of listeners, myself included, were thinking, okay, great, we'll finally get some answers right from the horse's mouth and not some clickbait journalist. Okay, show starts, and about 20 minutes in, I'm going to be paraphrasing from memory here, West is talking about people in the entertainment business who've screwed him over. Tim is asking about them. By they, Tim means the specific people who've screwed West over, the people in the industry. But what West means by they is the Jews. So Tim thinks, okay, we weren't going to talk about this next, but since you brought it up, let me ask what you mean by this. What's the reason for this belief of yours that Jews are a collective who are coming after people? Again, paraphrasing here, but Kanye basically walks off the set. The other 2 guests leave too, and that's the last we hear from them. It's like in mid-conversation, Tim pushes back and tries to get Kanye to explain himself, and he walks out. So why did he walk off? Well, again, the interpretation many had is that here is Kanye West being asked about the reasons for why he has these anti-Semitic conspiracy theory beliefs, and when he's questioned even a little bit, he doesn't have any answers and he leaves because he can't handle his beliefs being questioned. Other people have pointed out that Kanye West does have mental issues, and I mean clinically, clinical mental issues. I don't mean he's crazy because he's an anti-Semite. I mean, he's been open about having bipolar and I think some other disorders. So some people have been thinking, well, here is this narcissistic bipolar pop star who is used to being directly interviewed, and he's in this room where he's surrounded by 7 people. Tim, the main host, is freaking him out as he keeps making gestures with his hands over to the sound man to raise or lower the volumes of different people. West is overwhelmed by all of this. The hand gestures, the people in the too loose format, and he's overwhelmed, he freaks out, and he leaves. Now, again, does this excuse the unsubstantiated bullshit? He said no, but it's another factor to keep in mind, I think. So, what happens next? Well, according to most of the news commentators, Kanye posted a swastika on Twitter. Then Elon Musk suspended him for 12 hours. I think allegedly under the argument that he was inciting violence. Well, if you haven't figured it out by now what really happened and what the reason doesn't really matter to people, since people don't really want to know and just want to go with whatever story they already have in mind. So I see people saying, oh, he posted a swastika, you need to stop him, even though my ideology says black people can't be racist and a black white supremacist doesn't make any sense. But swastika bad, ban. And then you have other people saying, well, this should have been a test for free speech. If Elon Musk is really for free speech, then something like this should be allowed. This was the test. And what is my opinion on all of this? Myself, Bill? Well, I'm looking at the symbol and I'm saying, that's not really a straight swastika. That's the Raelian symbol. The Star of David with the swastika in the middle. Yeah, that's the symbol of the Raelian movement. And it has nothing to do with Nazis, really. Now, I have mentioned the Raelian movement by name before here on Satansplain. I often bring them up as an example of a non-theistic religion, because people whine that Satanism can't be a religion because we don't believe in deities. And as I've argued before, no, Satanism is a religion, and it's more specifically an example of a non-theistic religion. There are non-theistic religions in the world, and the first three I usually list off the top of my head, besides Satanism, are Jainism, Theravada Buddhism, and Raelianism. Now, the Raelian movement, or the Raelians, in a nutshell, they're people who believe extraterrestrials came to Earth in their spaceship thousands of years ago and genetically engineered humans. They don't believe in a god, but what's funny is they are atheists and creationists at the same time. They reject evolution and believe aliens created humans. So, I like to bring up the Raelians in arguments about religion because they're an example of not only a non-theistic religion, but atheists who are creationists. And that seems to piss off both the creationists and the atheists. Regardless, the impression I get is Kanye had no clue who the Raelians are, nor did almost everybody who was condemning him. I think he just posted it to get a reaction, and of course he did. So where does Kanye go next? Well, it seems that Kanye makes an appearance on InfoWars with Alex Jones. And I don't know if you saw the footage, but Kanye West is sitting there on the panel, and he's wearing a black hood or a black stocking or something covering and hiding his face. And Alex Jones tries talking to him, and Kanye says, No, I love the Jews, and I love Nazis. I think Hitler was a great man. He didn't cause the Holocaust. That didn't happen. And he did these great things. He invented this. He invented that. He invented the microphone I'm using. And now, by this point, Alex Jones is saying, he's wrong and too extreme. And I mean, think about that. If you're so outlandish in your views that even Alex Jones thinks you're crazy, then, I mean, what do you say to that? You may be crazy. But then it got worse. And you should look up this video for yourself and see it. But, Kanye picks up a Yoo-Hoo bottle. Yoo-Hoo, by the way, for people outside of the U, I don't know if it's sold in all countries, but yeah, Yoo-Hoo is a chocolate drink. Anyway, he's holding up a beverage bottle. And then later he holds up this little net, like a net skimmer for a fish tank. I think that's what it was. And he puts on this puppet show. And again, you should look it up and see it for yourself. So, is Kanye a racist, an anti-Semite, a troll? Is he playing 4D chess? I mean, I think the bottom line is the guy's just mentally ill. Where things will go from there, I don't know. Now, I was coincidentally, in the previous episode, talking about this long-standing conspiracy theory about Jewish people, which he seems to believe, about, the Jews as a collective and why I don't buy that conspiracy theory. I gave my proposed Satanic third side answer to that I think explains the observations that the anti-Semites are always citing and people are deathly afraid of addressing without buying into the conspiracy theory myself. You can listen to my take on that in the previous episode, the one dealing with Freemasonry and the Illuminati and other crazy ideas. Satansplain episode 26, I think it is. But I want to stop talking about Kanye West and just finish with a couple of points. Remember what Anton LaVey said about the third side. I know the word sheep gets overused these days, but really most people are sheep, and they pour a lot of emotions into issues which are presumed to have two and only two sides. You get collectivist thinking from both. And as LaVey said in this essay of his, there's usually a third side nobody is really talking or thinking about. Maybe a solution that renders the whole issue a non-topic. Maybe something else. Now, this isn't to say that as a Satanist you are under some obligation to never take a side on any issue. In political issues, for example, they often get polarized into two sides. And that doesn't necessarily mean that supporting one makes you a conformist. If you think voting for a particular candidate or joining a particular political activist group is serving your own shamelessly selfish interests because their goals happen to line up with yours, if you sincerely believe that their actions, their accomplishments, will make your world a better place for you, then by all means, go support them. As a Satanist, only you can ultimately determine who and what is worth your time. Or likewise, go and reject both ideas if that suits you better. You're under no obligation as a Satanist to serve humanity or bullshit like that. But I would say the Nazis or Adolf Hitler it's an example of something that has come a duality. Either you have to condemn each and everything remotely related to them in any way, shape, or form, or you are a supporter of them and you are a Nazi. And this is bullshit thinking. It's a false dichotomy. But I constantly see it. You see so many people online these days who are incapable of rational debate. They're incapable of objective discussion on anything. So the way they try to win a debate is by playing what I call a game of 6 degrees of Hitler. Okay, so you probably know about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or the 6 degrees separation game. This is the 6 degrees of Hitler game. And what you do is if you're in a debate with somebody, you try to associate your opponent with Hitler or Nazis or white supremacy in some form or another. And then once you do this, you apparently can claim victory. It doesn't matter what the facts are, how good of the arguments were, what the logic was. No. Just associate your opponent with Hitler and you win. So to give you an example, a personal example, there's a disgruntled ex-member of the Church of Satan. His name is Lamar Gabriel, and he quit the organization several years ago, and he wound up in Antifa. And I haven't heard from him in a while. Maybe he finally got a life, but for a while he was stalking and harassing me online. And he was really, really desperate to paint me as a fascist neo-Nazi supporter, whatever. And his argument for this was that back in the 1990s, there was a writer, I forget the writer's name, who he wrote all these articles on nonconformity and anarchy and stuff. And as the years passed on, he eventually became a white supremacist himself. And this was like in the 1980s. And it was in 1993 or 1994 that a book of his essays was compiled and published. And a friend of mine had done a book review of it. He had suggested it in part, I think, as essays that can help get into the mind of, an ideologue, the mind of a nonconformist, and a mind of an extremist, and that this might be of interest to other Satanists to that extent, because as Satanists, we're not neo-Nazis, but we are, in the minority. We are extremists, you could say. We're nonconformists. And again, the essays don't necessarily cover white supremacy. It was, he had written other stuff for a while before he came to believe in that ideology. But anyway, because I was friends with the guy who wrote the book review, that made me a Nazi sympathizer. Seriously, that was this guy's argument. So let me see, how many degrees of Hitler does that make me? Well, there was the author, the author who later became a white supremacist. So I guess he's degree 1. And then he published a book, and 30 years ago, somebody wrote a book review of it. So let's call that the 2nd degree. And I'm friends with the book reviewer, so that makes me degree 3. But we see idiots doing this with Satanism and the Church of Satan itself. You'll be online, you'll see somebody saying, oh my goodness, the rune of the black sun or whatever is in the satanic scriptures. That's a Nazi symbol. The Church of Satan are Nazi. Or, oh my goodness, Satanism embraces social Darwinism. They're Nazis. Or, oh my goodness, I found a Satanist who follows a couple of conservatives on YouTube. He's a right-wing Nazi fascist. It's just so pathetic. And not only because of the bogus logic, but just think of the whole concept of trying to social shame a Satanist. We are Satanists. We already associate ourselves with the Prince of Darkness. Granted, it's a metaphor, but you see my point. It's still a name we've taken up explicitly. Now, my point is not, I'm not saying, oh, Satan is evil and Hitler is evil, therefore it makes sense for Satanists to embrace Hitler. No. I'm pointing out the futility of trying to publicly shame a Satanist for being politically incorrect. It's so absurd. How retarded do you have to be? See what I did there? But again, it comes down to this false dichotomy people promote when it comes to the ever so emotionally charged subject of Nazis and Hitler. Personally, I reject the philosophy and agendas of actual neo-Nazis, who are far and few in between, by the way. And I also reject this idea that I shouldn't be allowed to read a copy of Mein Kampf or dig some of the Third Reich aesthetics if I want to. Or whatever. Again, false dichotomy. But to the people out there who have knee-jerk reactions against anything remotely Nazi-related, who refuse to have an objective conversation on, say, Hitler's biographical details, or think any and all people who post a swastika in any way, shape, or form should be banned from the internet, well, let me tell you something. If and when you do run into an actual neo-Nazi, or somebody espousing actual Nazi or white supremacist views, or saying the Holocaust never happened, whatever, well, here's a tip. Screaming at that person and calling that person a bigot does not really accomplish anything. You're not going to change the mind of an extremist like that by just shaming them. It's one thing if somebody, is just being an obvious troll and is replying to posts with insults or is sending, Heil Hitler at you and goofy photos. Somebody like that is just being a pest. They're a troll. Go block them, by all means. But on the other hand, if somebody says, I don't think the Holocaust happened, well, like Kanye West said, well, if you just call them an anti-Semite and a bigot and block them and dismiss them that way, well, that person is probably going to walk away with the thought of, hey, gee, I guess my position must be true because the only the only counter argument people have is calling me names and blocking me. They can't handle the truth. And when you ban them from social media, they're just going to go to some place where they can talk about those things and invariably end up in an unchallenged bubble with other neo-Nazis or whoever to talk about those things unchallenged in their own bubble, their own echo chamber. And I think in a nutshell, that's how you get people converted to that sort of ideology. Whereas if you say, okay, you say the Holocaust didn't happen, well, I've done some research and here are some different reasons I think we have overwhelming evidence that the Holocaust happened. You, on the other hand, used this argument, and that argument is actually a common one, but it doesn't hold up, and here's why, and so on. Learn how to actually debate if it's important to you. Now, will you necessarily convince this person you're debating? No, not necessarily, but there may be onlookers who see the conversation and think, well, I was a bit skeptical, but, because I heard some neo-Nazis say this thing and that thing, but now that you presented the counter-arguments to that, I can see how they're wrong about this and that. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough about this. I want to end with a lighthearted note. We started the show with a Satanacdote. Let's end with another Satanacdote. And we may as well cue the Satanacdote theme song again. It's short,
Satanic anecdotes. Satanacdotes.
That gave me a chance to get a glass of water, too. Anyway, this Satanacdote is from another satanic priest. How about that? Two Satanacdotes from two Church of Satan priests. This is from Reverend Bill Butler. He writes, "Greetings, Magister. Here is a musing from a night out. Sometime in the last few years, I took my mother out to eat. It was a nice bohemian type of place with a nice atmosphere, not a chain. I had on a black wool peacoat, and on the lapel a red sigil Baphomet pin encircled by a dragon. I requested seating for two, and we were led to our table. As the young college-age hostess is handing out menus, she looks at my pin, points, and without a shred of sarcasm, cynicism, or humor, asks, 'Are you a sheriff?' A bit confused and quite humored, I reply, no. Then she goes on to inquire about what exactly it is. As a person that never feels these explanations are ever worthwhile interactions, I gave my go-to cop-out response. It's just a heavy metal thing. Then she responds with, what band is it? To which I reply, none specific, just the whole heavy, dark, evil thing. She says, oh, so other heavy metal fans would get it. I reply back, I suppose they would. In short, I was quite amused by the naivety of someone who would think that I was a sheriff, let alone have no inkling about dark things or something as popular as heavy metal. Thank you, Reverend Bill. And I just picked up on that pun, cop-out response. I don't know if that was intentional or not. That's going to do it for this episode of Satansplain. I can't believe my voice actually made it through. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time. Hail Satan. You have been listening to Satansplain. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe where available. For more information on the show, visit Satansplain.com. And to learn more about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2022, Magister Bill M.